Candace Owens, she's just tripling down on this, talking about Kyrie Irving, who promoted a documentary about a book on his social media, linked to it, and the book is a anti-Semitic book that, after doing so, it kind of rocketed to being a bestseller in multiple categories on Amazon. Candace Owens has now, she's cornered the market on defending anti-Semitism from people that like Kanye West, and now she's siding with Kyrie Irving here, basically saying that the desire to take this kind of book off Amazon is censorious. Always returning back to this and comparing the book to Mein Kampf because it has apparently historical value. Sure.
Okay.
I was right. Last night, hashtag Hebrews to Negroes was trending on Twitter. It was a top trend on election night, no less. Wow. And everybody under the trend was saying, I'm watching it right now. I'm watching it. Why would they try to take this from us? Why would they try to keep this information from us? And that is what happens when you over-censor information. It was never necessary to attack Kyrie Irving, even if you felt that the information in this documentary was bad. And there are plenty of people that have spoken up and said that.
Okay, pause it. I'm sorry. So this is where she also has propaganda value for the right. She calls this information. There's nothing informative about this book.
Sorry, can I just clarify? It's still up on Amazon, right?
Yeah, they haven't taken it down.
So the censorship is just people criticizing it.
Yes.
So it's like, and this is what pisses me off about like the Tybee Greenwald shit too, is because like the conflation between people having conclusions about stuff, say this is actually bullshit, and being conflated with people saying like, hey, maybe we should consider whether this is on the platform or not. Those are two actually separate things. And these folks who always want to like sort of fluff the fans of whether it's sort of like right-wing reactionaries or this sort of Black Hebrew Israelite stuff, they can't like. I mean, I guess maybe I spoke too soon. Let's see if she actually talks about the content rather than just like the look what you made them do. They made them go watch this video.
Right, and she's also conflating just general conspiracy theory with information. I mean, she's going to go on to say it's like a historical record like Mein Kampf. She really, really enjoys and has been engaging in this a lot lately. Holocaust revisionism by downplaying it and saying that it's equivalent to anything that's happening right now.
And I'd recommend folks check out This Is Revolution. They had Wozni Lambre on, talked about this for about an hour and a half. And it's like, why don't we want people to have access to this information? Well, I'll answer the question of why people aren't super thrilled about it being propagated, which is like, if you subscribe to like these views, you basically have to believe that the Jewish people that everybody else understands as the Jewish people are in a conspiracy to hide who is the real chosen people of the Bible.
That's what Kyrie said in his press conference when people said, do you denounce this? Do you denounce this? And he said, I'm not anti-Semitic. How can I be anti-Semitic when I know who I am? Which means that you are being anti-Semitic because you're denying the existence of Jewish people as identified as being Jewish people, as we commonly understand who Jewish people are, and saying, you are imposters. I am the real Jewish person because I believe in this Black Hebrew Israelite conspiracy theory. And then it delves even further into what this book and what this movie engaging, which is that the people who present as Jewish people are working with Satan. Perhaps they're drinking the blood of children. Now we're in blood libel territory. So this is not information. This is not, firsthand historical records and what one can glean about past experiences in history. And it's really important for us to understand this. Like, no, it's not the same thing. This is, obvious propaganda, but again, it's still up. This is all moot, and yet she's still going to get worked up about it.
Efforts that the ADL went through in coalition with the NBA to punish him, and their efforts to then demand that Amazon take this documentary down, of course, was going to pique people's interest. Not only is the documentary the top documentary on Amazon, but it's also the book, which I didn't even know that it had a book, is now a bestseller on Amazon's list. So if you go to Amazon bestsellers, you will see Hebrew to Negroes is one of the best-selling books. And what I like about this story is because you know how I feel about free speech. I think that people have a right to be wrong. People have a right to take in information. People have a right to read whatever they want.
A right?
Little reminder, if you actually go on Amazon right now, you can order and read Mein Kampf. It is not an endorsement of Adolf Hitler to read a historical textbook. It just is not, right? And the idea that we should be censoring all of this information and no one should see it because it hurts some group of people, to me, does not gel well with our First Amendment rights. Amazon still not in trouble. Don't know how Kyrie Irving's entire life is on the line, but nobody is talking about Amazon.
Wait,
what about? Wait, yeah, this is the thing. Then what are you talking about here? What are you talking
should be
about
celebrating.
here? Yeah, I thought so you're saying that Amazon should be held accountable for having this up, or are you not saying that? Or you're just whataboutisming in order to deflect blame from Kyrie Irving?
Sorry, is there more clip?
No, I mean there is, but go on, Brandon. Go on. Yeah.
I mean, I just find it interesting, especially
it.
arguments like, oh, okay, I guess there isn't any more clip. But
it's like 2
I feel like she could go on forever. But I just find it interesting that like these arguments are made by people who are trying to like traffic conspiracy theories into the mainstream, relatively mainstream discourse. I have a hard time saying that word because it's the name of my podcast, but into the mainstream discourse, because it's like, these kinds of things. Really, the issue here is that there is a lack of information, but not really in terms of getting access to text like this. There's a lack of information being held, broadly speaking, by the American public about the realities of our government, the realities of our education system, the realities of our geopolitical stances and our history that make it easy for people like her to make this argument in the most disingenuous possible, because it's like, when you say censorship, it sounds scary, but like practically speaking, despite what our First Amendment says, we censor stuff all the time. Like we have censored as a country many things. Other countries censor many things.
ISIS back on Twitter.
Even if you were to concede that like that constitutes censorship, it's not something that we don't do. Because what this really is less about censorship. This is about picking cases that act as a good vehicle to argue that a specific brand of content creator, not just right wing but online sort of like semi-individual content creator, always has a freedom of commerce. You have a right to sell things everywhere you want. There's no one who should be allowed to tell you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just to interrupt really quickly, like that's why this is just this is a question about what Amazon chooses to stock its shelves with. Essentially, this is like saying the Choco Taco's being censored because it's not being sold anymore. It's just absurd. Keep going.
I was gonna say it's easier to pretend like it's a freedom of speech issue when like the thing that you're selling is yourself, more or less, in the sense of like you're a comedian, so you're doing like gigs, or you're like an author, so you're selling your books. But we're not talking about a private citizen doing their best to just have like private relationships. We're talking about someone trying to engage in commerce, selling a book, and that doesn't necessarily fall under the same freedoms of speech protections. And even if it did, we censor speech all the time, and people have survived up until this point. But I would say to the other extent of that issue, it's like, and this is not argument in favor of more censorship. We have a population that is just not very well trained in critical thinking. And so when she says that you're censoring information, it's like, even if I agree that it's information in the neutral sense, the context under which it's going to be interpreted by the average American is one that's going to be influenced by our cultural anti-Semitism that rears its ugly head every so often. And we have flare-ups all the time. We're in the middle of a flare-up now, and we have been since Donald Trump, where at least for the most part, people have noticed an increase in anti-Semitic sentiment amongst other types of bigotry. And so we know that people reading this book are not going to read it from the framework of like, oh, I'm curious about like this as a conspiracy text by a conspiracist who is like spreading conspiracies. We know that they're going to like, oh, some people think that just because something is in a book that's nonfiction, that it's true. And that's just like a very fundamental flaw with our way we do things in our society. Some people will quote stuff on you online, like the fact that it was in a book should mean something to you without any real engagement of like the criteria by which that book was published under, like who published it, what their life was like. And they'll just feel like, okay, this is in a book, so it's a fact. And we're just not a very critically thinking society, which is, something that these people like Candace Owens argue we should do more of. They argue against critical race theory in schools, which doesn't really exist at the elementary school level, but they argue against the specter of critical race theory because they argue against the specter under which books like this would be, read for what they were, which is a conspiratorial anti-Semitic textbook, because they're afraid of being lumped into that group with books like this. So they find, especially Candace Owens finds herself defending stuff like this a lot.
Well, speaking of the word textbook, did she call Mein Kampf a textbook in that, or am I? That's. I mean, maybe
It's a
she's
textbook,
misspeaking.
It's a
but
book of text.
information.
I mean,
Yeah.
Definitionally, it is.
It's a novella.
If you want to be pedantic about it, yes, it is a book of text. But it's just she won't give this up. I am curious. Speaking of Benny Shabiba, what he thinks about this. But go on, Binder.
You know, Brandon, I was thinking what you were saying, and absolutely on point about critical thinking. And there are people who see something published in a book and automatically think it's factual because it was published in a book. But at the same time, especially on the right, you have the flip side of that too, where there are people who believe that if it's published in a book, it can't be true because obviously they would never put the truth out there. The truth is too scary and unbelievable for the masses to be able to take in. So again, the critical thinking is absolutely super important for people to be able to read something and understand, where is it coming from? What is the source? How legit it is? And just because it's published in a book doesn't mean it's real. Also, if it's published in a book that's well sourced and is based on someone, coming from someone who has expertise in the field, it has weight among, it's not the same as some rando on Twitter tweeting at you saying, COVID masks don't work. Who do I believe? The pandemic specialist who has decades of experience in this field, or the guy on Twitter telling me not to believe that masks work.
Yeah.
So there's just a total lack of critical thinking across the board, and most of it, is coming from a very specific political ideology.
Well, to borrow Candace Owens's words, when you're in a type of fringe industry or a fringe group like this, before you're encouraged to look into any real texts or engage with the act of looking out for new information, they have you pretty well ingrained and pretty well indoctrinated to interpret any book that they don't hand give you or that you haven't been hand sourced from their reading list as propaganda. It's about getting you into sort of a pipeline or ecosystem where the kind of information that they want you to engage with is your primary source of information, and anything that they're not giving you or not primarily co-signing is just propaganda. But I would say people engage with ideas this way because that's just a byproduct of way they're taught to think economically. We're taught that we're the hyper rational thinker. That's how we get a lot of bad products onto our market. You see a lot of this in crypto. Everyone wants to believe that they're capable of doing their own research. The idea that you might look at the code and not understand it is something that people don't really necessarily want to agree with. They want to believe that internally, because of how we have sort of a hands-off culture for a lot of things, that we're just innately inborn with the capability to discern fact from fiction, truth from lies without any need for outside sourcing. And so you can just read a book like The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, and you'll just know how to interpret it correctly, or any ideas you have about it must be the correct one. There are no wrong ideas. No, for sure there are wrong ideas that you can have in a historical context. I think that we've allowed a lot of this lazy musing amongst right-wing pundits to get dangerously close to recreating traditional Nazism, just because we have all of those elements in our society, and especially in the intellectual culture of the right wing, and they're just not really demanded to have any sort of historical knowledge about the Nazi state or the first rise of fascism. So it's very easy for people to argue for things maybe we should just start exterminating homeless people. Maybe we should just start putting people who don't who we should just start putting stars on people who are communists. That has never happened before, right?
Yeah, we have a cultural affliction where and it's not saying much new, but that we're an individualistic society, but that we have media and historical I guess consumption disguised as entertainment that feeds into certain individualistic and siloed impulses, where you feel that you need to feel like you're doing your own research. It's like coddling a child or a teenager. They need to feel like they're independent so that they can feel confident in what they're doing. And that's a lot of the way that I think people consume media in this country, which is they want it specifically tailored to them, but one that makes them feel like they have agency in the situation, and it creates a lot of toxic and conspiratorial thinking.
Can we just do a thought experiment about what Candace Owens' prescription is in these moments? Like, so a really famous basketball player, one of the best point guards in the league, tweets out just a ridiculously Hitler quoting conspiracy documentary. Are people just really like act like they didn't see it?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not quite sure what, because like she's acting as if the only like rush to this documentary is because of like the criticism of it, but it's not. Like it's clearly
Well, that's what
because
people were saying in my mentions, because I was I think like I partly like started a little of this because I looked up the bestseller list and I took a screenshot of how it had skyrocketed, and people were like, "You're the one promoting it now."
Well, yeah, but it's like,
No, I'm just critiquing it.
but that's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
like nobody would be talking about it if it wasn't for Kyrie sharing it. And then, like, I wonder what the response should have been. Just be like, oh, like, just ignore that happened. Like, what?
No, it's
just
so dumb.
ridiculous.
And then everything in the replies was like, well, of course the media is running with this. It's like, all right, well, now
Yeah,
we
well,
know
those are
what,
anti-Semitic.
now we know what we're talking about here. Yeah. So like, yeah, promotion.
They
and
care.
critique is not promotion. So that's.
But like, it's a dynamic. Like scandal will draw attention to it. Like, but there's
The
no
scandal's inherent in that he's, one of the top paid basketball players in the country and has thrust himself into this conversation.
Yeah, and like, so what's the difference between, okay, he promotes it and it gets a smaller bump, but like there's zero critical discussion of it to speak of. So like, or this scenario where there's, okay, maybe admittedly a slightly bigger bump in attention, but it's saturated with actual criticism of the thing. Like, it's a horse apiece. Like,
And people
it's
critiqued his flat earth kind of stuff, but there isn't the consequences of, say, like riling up anti-Semitism that it's going to create. There's different conspiracy theories that have different outcomes.
Well, I should say I'm uniquely positioned where I did not criticize his flat eartherism, but I am criticizing this anti-Semitism. So you can believe me on this one. But, just to your point, Matt, I would say, like, if you're going to abstract it and assume that, like, Candace Owens is in her heart not someone who wants, like, a Nazi or fascist takeover of this country, I would say her, solutions are the traditional, if abstracted solutions of most people who make their money from, like, producing content about problems online, where she has two solutions. You should allow people who have a platform and make money from that platform to aimlessly muse about whatever topic they want, no matter the consequences for people outside of it, because you should not be allowed to interfere with their money-making economy in that sense. Or if you are going to do something, it should be in the form of making content of your own, and we should have a content battle so that way we can both get clout. And the fact that some people want to exist outside of a clout economy and aren't just trying to make money from like the existence or battling of anti-Semitism or the existence of battling of abortion rights or the existence and battling of civil rights of all types, it's supposed to be something that is their problem and not hers or any content creators, which is that, like, the only solution to like a content creator making bad content is to make good content and let it be hashed down the marketplace of ideas, which is ridiculous.
Marketplace of content. That's First Amendment come to life.